part project that focuses on looking outward in appreciation and then looking inward as well. I had this idea because our weather is really, really warming up now. It feels like summer outside, and that's my preferred weather. But even if it's not, it's something to look at with appreciation. So I'm using this pen just so you can see really well what I'm doing, but you can use any color you like. You can use a normal pen. And just in the center of your page, not too big and not super small, just draw a circle. And you can see that mine is really more of an oval. That's fine. There's no reason to expect yourself to be able to just throw down a perfect circle. This is just a spot where we're going to start our thinking. So first we're going to look outwards. And to do that, we're just going to start building a pattern around this little sun shape, the sun. So I'm going to start with simple triangles. I encourage you to start with something simple as well, since we're going to just keep adding more and more around this as we move outwards and as we think about noticing more details of the world that are beautiful to us and that we might not always notice. Just today, my little sister was telling me that she just realized that there's a family of quails living in her front yard, and she, told me how much joy that brought her just to see them walking around and exploring the world and discovering the different parts of her little yard, and how exciting that was for the baby quails. And that's not something she would have ever seen if she hadn't been there looking at the right time. So I encourage you, as you start filling in this pattern, to just think about things that maybe you've noticed today or in the past week, little things that you found beautiful. And this doesn't have to be in the natural world. Maybe it's someone who treated you with kindness, or who you saw act selflessly. Maybe it's someone who surprised you, or something that surprised you. Whatever it may be, it's important when those things happen to stop and take stock and appreciate them. Because while they're everywhere, we don't always see them happening. And so it's a really joyful moment when we get to have these experiences of surprise and of joy and of loving kindness. And I think you can see that in the sun, just because it is in the exact right space to support life. It's in the exact right spot. Any further away, it would be too cold. Any closer, and it would be too warm. But it's right where we need it to be, always. Keeping us going, keeping us alive, and keeping the world around us alive, so that we get to experience all this wonder around us. And you can see that in the moon as well. Our moon is a really rare and special thing because it is positioned in the way that it can just exactly cover up the sun, which I don't think there's another example of in the universe that we know of. So in that way too, we're lucky just to be where we are. So if after you have this basic sun shape, start to go in with more abstract things, maybe things that you might not always necessarily associate with the sun itself, but maybe just with beauty or with heat instead of light. So I'm gonna make these little wiggles, try and keep them even, but just going outward from the spaces in between my triangles. And as I do this, I'm thinking of the warmth of the past couple days, but I'm also thinking of the warmth of the people I know and I care about, and the warmth that I feel toward them and that they give to me. That care too is something that keeps us alive and keeps us going, and is really an astonishingly adaptable thing. People find ways to connect with each other no matter what. My friends and I have been sending each other a journal that we mail all over the country to each other because we live far apart now, just to update each other on our lives. And when it's done, we'll have this artifact of all of us together, even though we aren't physically in the same space. So think about maybe the ways that people have surprised you and kept you warm, literally or metaphorically, figuratively. Because people have almost an endless capability to do just that, to help each other survive. And don't like, you can see me here turning my paper. Don't be afraid to turn your paper around as well. It'll make it easier, especially if you're using a really inky pen like I am. It might make it a little easier for you to not smear your lines, or just make sure that you're making the same motion. You don't have to make things any harder for yourself than need be, than they already are. As always, we're not going for perfection here, and everyone is hopefully making their own thing. So whatever you're making is unique to you. Maybe unique to your own reflections that you're having right now, your own thoughts that are inspiring you. And that's really wonderful as well. That each of us are so different, living these completely different lives, and here we are connecting and all taking the time to contemplate that and appreciate it. You can even thank yourself for showing up for yourself today. You can think of how wonderful it is that, JTNN and all of these organizations have made it possible for us to connect. I know I'm thankful for that. Good way if your mind is starting to wander, perhaps towards what you have to do later, something that's stressing you. A good way to come back to the present moment is just to listen to the sound of your pen or your pencil working its way across the page as you move it. Pay attention to what it feels like to hold your pen, to press it down just the right amount, to make your lines or even your shading or your shapes, whatever you've decided to do. And there's no rush here. As you can see, I'm working very slowly on this relatively simple pattern, because the point here is to really appreciate the time that we're taking. Another sense of appreciation that you might foster right now is sensory. Think of the not only the sights, but the smells and the sounds and the tastes that you associate with summertime that can only be found right now. Maybe it's the sound of crickets that you hear out your window when you're falling asleep. Maybe it's the buzz of hot air, or even the smell of wet pavement from sprinklers in the afternoon. What of those things have you seen maybe for the first time this year recently? Now I'm drawing to the close of this sort of second layer of patterns. You may still be working, you may already be done, but wherever you are, we're just going to go around one more time before we start to work our way inwards. And here we have all these really complicated shapes. And now what I want you to do is maybe make a pattern that's a little more open, a little less dense, just because as much as we're noticing all of these details of wonderful things, we also want to open up ourselves to the possibility of seeing even more. And that means making space for it, leaving space for it, both in our attentiveness to the world and our willingness to see those things. So what I'm going to do is try and create maybe like a little bubble pattern. Bubbles are something I associate with summertime, especially maybe playing in the park when I was younger, blowing bubbles. But they also represent the sort of spaciousness, you know. They're very thin, but they're able to contain a lot and move through a lot, even as they're fragile. Maybe you can find something of yourself in that. You have the capacity to experience so much joy and love, and yes, pain and sorrow. But those are all sides of the same coin. As you go through, notice something maybe you wouldn't normally think about. I know I talk about the sound of the pen on the page a lot, but how does it feel when you move your wrist? How do your fingers feel? Are they a little sweaty because it's hot out? How does the rest of you feel? Not just the part that is focused here on the page, but your whole body. Perhaps those of you who just did the yoga may already be really aware of yourselves and your breath. But all of us can take a moment to just appreciate our breathing and to really pay attention to that too. Just open yourself up to what you may not yet have noticed. And then, as wherever you are, as we draw to our close with this sort of third open, more simpler pattern, start to look inwards. We've been looking outward this whole time, but now let's think of what's within us. You know, how do you feel not only physically, but emotionally? How do you feel that you've grown recently, and why? Begin to reflect on maybe past summers and ways you felt then, or past seasons and how you've transitioned from them. And then as we reflect on this feeling of growth, I'm just going to start drawing these wide sort of petal shapes. I'm doing this in a different color because we're entering sort of a different state of mind here. We're practicing different thoughts, but you don't need to change your pen color if you don't want to, or if you only have the one pen. As you work inwards, Begin to consider yourself, to appreciate what's within you as well as outside of you. Your strength, your ability to be caring, to be thoughtful, most of all, your ability to grow, which is why I'm drawing this flower shape. Because that really is a very special thing about all of us, is that we're able to grow and learn and change. And that's not something you should ever take for granted. And as you work your way inward, you can keep it really simple. I'm just gonna follow these same lines in maybe one or two more times. Just as I continue to consider the different parts of myself. Maybe you're really creative, or you're excellent at problem solving. Maybe you're good at making people laugh or bringing them together. Try to move into yourself as you move inwards on the page. And consider your favorite aspects of yourself, or places where you feel you've grown. None of us are anywhere near perfect, but we are always growing. And that's a really wonderful thing. Okay, I'm gonna fill this in one more time, and then we'll start on another pattern. So one more time, I'm really belaboring this point of appreciating yourself, because I feel that sometimes, that's discouraged or mistaken for vanity. But the truth is, you can be humble and still appreciate yourself. And in fact, only ever allowing yourself to feel negatively about yourself in the name of humility will ultimately make you focus on yourself more, not less, because you'll always be worrying about your worst qualities instead of celebrating your best and encouraging your best. So take this time now to appreciate and encourage your favorite parts of yourself. And then now, as I finish this third layer of the flower, I'm going to go back through and just fill in that inner layer with little lines. And as I do this, I'm thinking of the connections between my past self and my current self, between my future self and now, or just my future in general and now. I accept that I can't really know or control how changes come to me or come through me. But you can appreciate that change and growth. And you can appreciate the connections between you and the world that we've, cultivated this appreciation for, that allowed that to happen. The connections between you and other people who have something to teach you, or to whom maybe you have something to offer to teach. We're all part of this larger community. Your individual self is also a product of that community. And knowing your most positive qualities, you can also cultivate that appreciation again for those around you. There's no need to make a real distinct separation between the two. So now that I've made those connections, I'm going to turn this around again. And then here in the center, let's think about our potential. Not the future in what we expect of it or what we plan to do, but just the idea of total possibility. And as you do that, just draw a simple teardrop shape here in the center, shaped like a seed. You may add a few patterns around it. But as you look at this, and maybe as you just add more patterns surrounding the seed so full of potential, focus on your own potential. Maybe not any specific thing, the potential to achieve a goal, the potential to be better, a better caregiver, a better friend, a better family member. But just the potential to be. Appreciate that which you don't know and can't know. And as you do that, go ahead and make just abstract patterns surrounding the seed. Patterns that don't represent anything in particular, except a possible meaning, which is what we're focusing on right now, this possibility. Because being truly present also means acknowledging that change. And you can see now, even as we sort of abstract the shape of the seed further and further out, it also looks like an egg, another object that represents just endless potential. And as you go to meet the flower, you can connect your patterns to it, or you can keep from touching it, depending on how you're feeling, what feels right to you. But nonetheless, again, remember that all of these things, the potential of the seed, the growth of what's inside you, the beauty of what's around you, all of these things are connected. They're not separate. They all influence each other. They all depend on one another, just as we depend on one another. And that is not a bad thing. It's a beautiful thing. And as you go out into the petals more so, think about the potential of other people that you know, what that means to you, what you appreciate in them. Really take this last part slowly. Appreciate each moment. Think about how even you depend on the pen to make the marks, but the pen depends on you to use it. Even that is a form of connection. It's just maybe one we don't often think about. And now's your chance. Now's your chance to appreciate that and to wonder at that. And then as a last step, we're going to start connecting this flower out to our sun, which I'm going to do just by adding little leaves in between my petals. I'm going to fill them in just to give them a little contrast from the petals themselves. You don't have to. But as you do, come back to sort of this present moment. Appreciate the sun that's shining down to you, all the growing, living things that support you in one way or another. Take that time just to think of them. They're part of you. Whether that's a pet that gives you emotional support, or a spouse, a sister, a brother, a child, even the food you eat. Plants or animals, those are living things that help you to survive and to live and to support them. And there you go. I hope that thinking about this and contemplating being connected to the world around you has helped you to have a new sense of appreciation and just feel positively about just being here today, because it's something that we're all lucky to be, no matter where we are. And it's something that's worth being grateful for when we have the chance. So thank you, and I'll see you next week.